Welcome to the Land Investing Business Secret Podcast, where each short episode we talk about the strategies, experiences, and the tools to help you launch, grow, and scale your land business. Learn how to find freedom within your own business, find out ways to build consistency in your processes, and hear how other everyday land investors are winning so you can get to the next step closer to building your dream life through your land business. And I'm your host of the Land Investing Business Secrets Podcast by Pebble, Jesse Kwong. Hey, how's it going? It's Jesse from the Land Investing Business Secrets Podcast. I've got a amazing guest, Ryan Becker. You might not know him because he kind of doesn't exist too much in the sort of social media space, but he is running a fantastic land business. And honestly, like I've had the chat with him, and I'm recording the intro now, and it's like, man, I realized how simple of a business he runs, not in the operational side of things, but he just seems to have so much clarity in what he does, and he sort of figured it out. And in this episode, it's really, we're going to dive into sort of the mindset of Ryan and how he thinks about service. Because a lot of us sort of think about, we're just going to maximize profits here, which is great, but how he goes about it. And then we're going to dive into more operational stuff too, which is like crazy on the opposite end, talking about processes and how he goes about document. It's like super tangible stuff. He even talks about his marketing and some details in there. So I'm sure you guys are going to love that. So enjoy this episode here with Ryan Becker. All right. How's it going, everybody? We've got a special guest here, Daniel Seavers. Daniel, how are you doing today?
Doing great. How about yourself?
I am doing well. I love jumping on these calls and just sort of having a conversation and asking questions, sometimes really dumb questions, sometimes good questions. So just curious here, especially like someone like yourself in the land space. Well, before we even talk about what you do, who are you, and sort of describe to us in what capacity are you involved with in the land space?
Okay, sure. So, I have lived in Texas for almost 15 years now. My dad's retired Air Force, so we were moving all around the world and then settled down in Texas. Went to school at Baylor. Haven't escaped Waco quite yet. I should. I'll probably be moving out of Waco sometime this year. More than likely, but anyways, and so we can get into it, but kind of got connected into the land space just by chance. And then right now I work as an acquisitions manager for a land investing business. It's been around since 2019, I believe.
Wow, I didn't know you were doing it for that long already.
I haven't been. The company has been.
Oh, got you. Okay.
I'm right at the 1 year mark, actually.
Okay.
Almost to the day. Yeah, I need to take a look at that.
Wow, happy 1 year. So when you say land acquisitions, what does day-to-day look like? Or what are the big buckets that you're responsible for?
Sure. So interestingly enough, when I was first hired on, so we have our owner, we have an acquisitions manager. We've got one other guy that's in my same role now, but when I was hired on, it was just the three of us. The idea was that I was going to be doing all of the outbound and just getting those initial leads and then pushing them to the acquisitions manager was the initial idea. We didn't do a single one of those. I ended up just keeping with my leads all the way through. So I do, heavy outbound, typically about 600 outbound calls a day on the triple line dialer. And then I just see those leads through from intake to offer through contract closing, all those things. I've started getting involved on the dispo side a little bit here recently. I have my first one where we're doing like the flat broker fee MLS listing. So it'll be my number on the listing that people are calling. So a little bit more on the dispo side. But yeah, and then over the last few months, more and more so, they've been putting my number on the mailers as well. We do our direct mail through Pebble, so I get inbounds as well. It's been solid.
That's so interesting. So you started really then on the outbound, basically cold calling and then pushing it to an acquisition manager. Why did they make the decision, or why did you make the decision to say, "Hey, I'd rather just look after the entire flow of acquiring that property versus pushing it to a an acquisition manager?"
Um, well, I mean, they're always flexible for, what their ideas are initially versus what what we ultimately think is going to work. And they just realized quickly that I was probably capable of more than just the initial call, that I could do the comping and um, making offers, all those things as well. So it just worked out nicely that way.
So, Daniel, help me understand, how does someone find a Daniel? If they wanted a Daniel on their team, like, what is your background? How did you get into outbound calls, and how did you get into this acquisition? I'm sure a lot of people are listening. Hey, that's the kind of person I need on my team. I need a Daniel. How should one go look for a Daniel? I mean, what kind of traits do you have? Obviously, not everybody's the same, but help us understand what that could possibly look like.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I mean, my background is in retail sales, which I think, is very helpful. Some good kind of foundations there. And
When you say
then,
retail sales, what does that mean?
like, I worked in a store. I worked in a few different Leslie's pool supply stores over the years. Yeah, it was my first job the first summer out of high school. I did that all throughout summers during college, and then for a little while I helped run a store. I was the assistant manager of one of them after I graduated, while I was still kind of figuring out what I was doing. But so yeah, I mean, I would say people with retail sales backgrounds would definitely be solid. There's been a lot of helpful things from that. And then, I mean, as far as how I found this, it was, just good networking. Essentially, it was just someone I went to college with, Mason McDonald. He happened to throw out in one of our we're in the same fraternity, so in one of our group texts, hey, one of my business partners is hiring, and so that was my current boss, Dan Habercost. So that was how we got connected.
Okay, so through networking, they put their nets out, they casted their nets out, caught you. Um, well, help us understand, what do you enjoy? Again, when somebody's looking for somebody in house to work for them, like in this capacity, what do you enjoy about it? Well, yeah, I think, like, what part of the business do you enjoy, so that other people can look out for sort of similar patterns?
Yeah, I mean, I'm outgoing. I like talking to people. I clearly don't get tired of it. I'm a full year in, and all I do is sit at home and talk to landowners all day. So that's just something that's like, people, typically know about themselves. They like it or they don't. Like problem solving. We get creative with title issues and everything. We'll take them on. So I've got some probates going right now. I've got one quiet title going right now. So those sort of things. And then just sales overall, it's a fun game to get better at. And it's always interesting to see how leads play out as we, follow up with them long term. What else? Those are some of the main things I would say.
I mean, you came from, like, retail sales, so how did they train you up? Do they just walk you through? Did they shadow you? And was there sort of maybe some books they also got you to read, or you read up to brush up on outbound calls?
Yeah, great question. So we did a decent amount of training. A lot of it was like specific to products and those sort of things. So product training aside, the biggest thing was assumptive sales was taught to us. So just part of it was like, whatever we're recommending that they get, just putting it on the counter. Like, you're assuming, okay, hey, so when you take this home, this is what you're going to do with it, X, Y, Z. So it's just what you assume it's already happened, which that translates for sure is, you get people thinking about, okay, so after we sign the agreement, then, when it's time to close, you'll get to select if you're doing direct deposit or a check. You can get people thinking about the results of the sale, before you even talk numbers, is kind of how that translates. But
That's called assumptive sales. Is there a book on that, or is it sort of a general philosophy with sales, or?
I'm sure there's specific books on it, but it's just kind of an idea. They didn't have us do any books when I very first got on board here at Front Range Land, though. I listened to Fanatical Prospecting. That's Jeb Blunt, I want to say. That's a really good one. That's all about
Is that a podcast
outbound.
or is that a book?
Book.
Okay.
Yeah, Fanatical Prospecting.
Okay.
That's a really good one. One of the good things in there, I won't remember if it's called like the 3-month rule or something like that, but is, if you come on a time where you're going, oh my goodness, I just can't seem to close anything, I'm not going to hit numbers this week. It's like if you rewind 90 days, it's like, were you doing the lead metrics then to get, to actually be able to be closing 90 days later. So that's a good thing to keep in mind.
Okay, got you. So yeah, you got product training. So you really learned the ins and out of land. I mean, for somebody who didn't know much about land, what was sort of was there any hard concepts about land and acquiring land, or is it pretty straightforward?
Most of it's pretty straightforward. And then, maybe each deal you learn one new thing. There's usually not one where every complicated thing under the sun is going to be thrown at you at the same time. So you can kind of get the hang of it as you go.
Yeah. Now, there's a lot of services out there that you can sort of hire, and they'll do the cold calling. And you're on the opposite end of that. You're working in-house with a team. Tell us, what are some? I think clearly you haven't worked with service cold calling services, but from what you know, can you sort of give us a pros and cons and kind of sell us on the idea of hiring somebody in-house?
Yeah, I mean, I think the number one thing that I hear from people on my end, seller feedback, is they'll say, oh, I get tons, I get X amount of, they'll exaggerate, 10 calls a week on this. You're the only person I've actually talked to because you sound like you're actually from the United States. So I don't know. That's the biggest thing that I hear is, accent versus no accent. So I know that there's international cold callers that don't have accents. So, to me, it's as long as you can have an intelligent conversation about the property. Cause there's cold callers that are great as long as they know generally, what this is about. Cause, if I'm an owner and they're asking me about a perk test, but don't know what a perk test is, then it's going to be a little disjointed.
Yeah. So you definitely have a lot more context. I would assume so you have the context, and then you have this sort of, you don't have an accent, and so I never knew, there's no concrete evidence here, but you're telling me that people have literally said that they don't talk to others because they have an accent, they're overseas. Maybe it's a trust issue, maybe it's something else, and that's a real thing in what you're seeing.
Yeah, that's just feedback that I get. And then in addition to that, me being the person that's also going to be doing the due diligence and all those things, it's nice to have them on the phone before an offer is even being made, so that way I can ask them. There's things that'll pop out at me. I won't ask about access if I can see that it's got tons of road frontage, but if it's kind of tucked back, I can ask them about obvious things I need to know before we do make an offer. Who the owners are, all those things.
What does the first conversation sound like for you? Give us a high level overview of what happens in that conversation, how long it is, and then what do you come back to them with after?
Sure. So generally not super long conversations. The high level info is going to be knowing who all is on title. So most common is going to be either just one person or someone and their spouse, either living or deceased. Little bit more conversation to be had if it's still under someone else's name and there's title work needed. But so ownership is big. And then, we're also asking about ownership so that we get that objection kind of unveiled ahead of time if we need to, if there's going to be a spouse objection. So ownership, and then always, we're looking for access, both physical and legal. Because all the time I'll see landlocked parcels. I'll ask about access. Oh yeah, we went back there all the time. Okay, sure, but where is where's the road, or where's there legal access? And like, oh, well, it's just my family that lives there. It's like, okay, we could probably get an easement if needed, but anyways, so access, and then utilities. Whether I do a lot in the Carolinas, so always asking about if it doesn't have sewer, if they've ever had it. The soil's tested for septic system per test, and then those are the main things.
So that'll all be covered in the first call.
Yeah, I get everything knocked out of the way for sure.
And how long are you thinking of a conversation? Is that like just a couple minutes type of thing, or?
Yeah, like 5-10 minutes.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So then after I find out all that, I'll find out what their expected pricing is. And then in most cases, then from there, we tell them, hey, we're going to review the property, and then we do some additional due diligence on our end. We'll have someone drive by, and then we'll get back with an offer within a day or so. If it's an area where it's infill lots and we know what we can offer, then we'll just offer on the spot. But for the most part, there's a little bit of delay.
Right. Okay. And then what does follow-up look like? So maybe, you will follow up with an offer, obviously, if there is an offer to be made. And what if they're on the fence about it, or they, what does the play look like from there? How do you sort of continue to follow up with them to try to get that deal?
Sure. So we definitely stray away from, sometimes there'll be those, especially because the most common with inbounds, where if they're responding to several letters at the same time, then they'll call in and they'll just say, okay, email your best offer to X email, because they want to do it like bid style, and that's totally fine. But I kind of want that conversation there. I'm not just going to shoot off an email offer and then move on. And so we just make sure that we have an answer one way or the other, even if that answer is, okay, I'm thinking about it, because then we're just following up, as quickly as needed after that. But there's plenty of times where, most of the time we'll know if everything makes sense for both of us now, then great. There's been plenty of times. In fact, I just had a closing on the buy side. And then we went under contract to sell within the first day that we put it back on that same one back on the market. But this is one where I talked to the guy 6-ish months ago. He wanted X price. So I was like, I'm not quite there, but let me keep an eye on it. And then a couple weeks ago, I had my task set for, check pricing here. And I was like, oh, well, it's come up enough. Yeah, let's do their number. It works. And that'll be a pretty decent one and a quick flip. So
I don't know how compensation works, but, you don't need to give us numbers, but how does that get structured for you? Are you sort of commission based? Is it a flat fee? What should people think about?
So I'm W-2. So I have a base, and then I also do have commission on net profit. So I see commissions once the deal sells.
Okay.
And it's HUD to HUD. What did we actually net? A commission of that. So that's how that's structured. Yeah.
I love all like the details I'm just getting out of you. And I think this is, again, a perspective we don't typically get on the show. We've had a lot of cold calling services come on, and I don't know, if you were the owner of business, I'm assuming you would probably go this route of hiring in-house over working with some external service. But is there a case where you think maybe a service does make sense over having somebody in-house?
I'm sure there is. I mean, of course, I mean, if you're super, super high volume, like it's funny actually. I remember very early into this job, which I don't know, retail sales is very different from like what you think of the actual world of sales, right? So I think if this is like my first sales job, um, is very early on into it, I got a call, basically a cold call for like medical insurance. And as soon as I mentioned that I had benefits through my employer, the guy just like hung up, and I was like, "Oh, I'm a cold caller," so I was like going to kind of entertain the call. Why'd the guy hang up on me? My boss Dave was like, "Actually, I ran a team like that, and their time is better used just hanging up on you and getting to the next because they're just so volume focused." So, I mean, for sure, if you're just blasting volume, then then you're gonna have that much more to comb through. So I don't know. I mean, in my mind, I am able to disqualify a lot on that first call. Which the more I can disqualify, the better. That's kind of the name of the game. I'd rather have fewer real leads than a bunch that I think are leads and really aren't.
Right, right, right. Okay. Why don't you walk us through a deal? I know you submitted one. I get all our guests to fill out a form, and it seems like you have a really interesting one here about 28.5 acres. Can you sort of walk us through? How did that first conversation go? What were some of the if there was any challenges? If you want to give us some profit numbers, awesome. And then what were some learning lessons? So yeah, a little bit about the journey about that deal.
Yeah, so this one's still ongoing, but it's the most interesting one as of recent. So this one, and I want to pull it up because I don't want to put my foot in my mouth. I'm just trying to remember if this was an inbound or if this was from a cold call. Yeah, okay. So this one was an inbound from a mailer, and yeah, it's 28 acres. It's interesting. It looks the first thing I asked the guy is it looks landlocked, but there is access. It's kind of like right behind a neighborhood. And it's fully wooded, but you can see there's 3 access points. And so he was asking for 180, and I sent it over to, which as we do commonly, if the comps aren't super straightforward, in all the main markets that we work in, we've got agents, we can send it over to them. They'll take a look pretty quickly, let us know what they think it would sell for. He told me this was one where instead of responding with numbers, he was like, well, let me actually send this over to a developer friend of mine. And that developer was kind of interested. He was like, yeah, man, as a development, this is worth 250. And so it ended up being that developer was interested enough that, it looked good enough that we went ahead and I locked it up with the seller for a little bit longer due diligence. I told them that, it was going to be some sort of development. So we would need time to check for, just basically check that the city and the county are going to let us do what we want to do with it. And that's basically where we're at right now. We should have a contract today for 250. We'll basically do it as a double close. We would assign it if it was almost anywhere else to North Carolina. So we'll just do it as a double close. And the 2 contingencies that they had were, 1, making sure that it had deeded access, and then 2, that either they'll be able to get public sewer or they'll be able to figure out a septic situation for it. And just today I was able to find a recorded easement for access. So that is good to go. So hopefully we'll get that contract today, and then everything else will go well between the developer in the city, and that'll be a really good one. That would be my biggest spread for sure.
Wow. Okay. Now, so you talked to a developer friend of yours or a realtor of yours to kind of get a quick look over that property?
So this was a realtor, and while he was taking a look at it, he was running comps, but it also just made him think of a friend of his, someone that he knew that's a developer. So,
Gotcha. And is it that same developer that is the one who's going to pick up the property then?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Right.
they did some initial like desktop analysis on it. They looked at the soils and everything.
Yeah.
Because that was something that I was curious about, and to them it looks good even still. But it's in a specific type of wetlands. It's like forested shrub wetlands or something. I think it's really minor.
And that's still workable, that property then?
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Well, congrats on your biggest spread so far.
Appreciate it. It's not, we can't count it until it's closed, but it's an exciting one for sure.
Okay, couple more quick questions here. As an acquisition manager now that does all the outbound calls and whatnot, what tools are under your belt that you use on a daily basis?
So I'm calling out of Mojo. Using CallRail is my actual red dial out of. That way I'm able to do text and call. So yeah, I'm using those things. Of course, Mojo's pushing all my leads over to Pebble. And then we run ringless voicemail as well. What is that through? I have it here. I don't actually. Sly broadcast. We run ringless. Our data is coming from PropStream. Dan handles pretty much all the data. Those are the main things I can think of. Oh, and then I've always got a window up of Regrid as my kind of universal GIS. Yeah.
Okay. Now you can sort of look up that data inside of Pebble now.
Exactly. Yeah. I've started doing that as well.
Awesome. Okay, before we let you go here, I just feel like you've just been dropping gems here the entire time.
Oh, good.
Can you give us 3 tactical tactics or tips or anything in general that you've learned in the past year, or maybe in your whole sales journey? Just give us 3 quick hits of things that we should keep in mind, that you keep in mind, or advice that you just want to give us.
Yeah, I like this question because I've been kind of diving into the sharpening sales skills recently. So, the number one would be to find your seller's why they either, usually it's not need to sell. We know we're not dealing with much distress, so why they want to sell. One of my absolute favorite deals was a guy wanted $40,000 exactly because he wanted to buy his wife a wheelchair accessible van. So boom, we got him 40. He was able to do it. One of my favorite ones. So digging into that more so. Outside of that, other things to keep in mind. I've recently adopted the philosophy of doing all live signatures. So I've had enough verbal handshakes and then I'll sign it tonight, and then I never hear from them again. Or there's just stupid delays that don't need to happen. It just drags out. I'm doing all hey, let's walk through this together. Okay, sign while we're on the phone. Perfect. And then lastly, we talked about follow-ups and you asked about it. It's the biggest thing is just follow up with everyone, especially inbounds, even the ones that we think are crazy on price. We always set those ones on actual 30-day, because the thought is that 30-day mark we see kind of where they landed in the rubble of offers, that because they probably submitted it to a lot of them, and if they were asking $100,000 for their $25,000 property, then they have a bunch of $10,000 offers. You see where they're at. Some of them, I'm just holding on to it, whatever. You follow up in another 60 days. I'm surprised at some of the ones that I end up getting, even after considering the where things start, and then people. That's been a big lesson for sure. If I can throw this in at the end, is in this business, the people that aren't very good at this do my job for me all the time. Truly. I had one very recently where I asked the guy what price he wanted. He's like, well, I thought I had a contract for $35,000 with someone, but I never heard from them again. I'm like, and he's like, he knows that they're way past when it would have needed to close anyways. I'm like, well, do you think maybe they made a bad deal and they just weren't quite ready to man up and call you and say that they made a bad deal? He's like, yeah, I think they did. And I'm like, okay, well, I can do 25. Not, that's what I can actually do. He's like, yeah, that sounds fair. So we ended up making it happen. So other people do my job for me all the time, which is great.
That's awesome. Well, Daniel, thanks so much for coming on the show here and really sharing all this information with us and your experience. And from a perspective, again, we don't typically hear, but I think a lot of our listeners are going to find huge value. Now, is there a way people can be helpful to you? If so, should they reach out, and how can they reach out to you?
I'm not sure. I don't know about how I would necessarily need help from anyone. I guess I could throw in, as always, that if other people need funding for their land deals, ground up partners would be the way to go. Okay. So that's Dan and Mason's fund. And then if I can be of help to anyone's teams, as far as the acquisition side, just just help closing deals, any questions that I can answer, I'm happy to. Got lots of inbound, outbound negotiation experience, so happy to help where I can.
Awesome. All right, Daniel, I'm praying this recorded. It's warning me that it isn't recording, but I see the little graphs there. So fingers crossed it's all recorded. Thank you so much for your time, Daniel. And maybe we'll have you back on again to talk about further learnings here. It's been awesome chatting with you. So thanks again, Daniel.
Thank you. Take care.
Before you stop this episode or hit the next episode, I want to personally thank you for listening to this episode of the Land Investing Business Secrets podcast by Pebble. If you found this helpful, we'd greatly appreciate any awesome reviews and ratings on whichever platform you are listening to this on. And if you have 2 minutes and wanted to step it up even more and help others, feel free to share this in other Facebook groups or pages or any communities, giving others a heads up of the Land Investing Business Secrets podcast or the specific episode that may help them on their land investing journey. Once again, thanks so much for listening, and catch you on our next episode.